How do you do, neighbor? It's Berean Spirits time once again. The boys have gathered around and they're ready for you. So join in, make comments, and study with the guys as they try to study as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. And now, here's the guys.
To another episode of the Berean Spirits. My name is Chris Peltz. I'm the evangelist with the Southside Church of Christ in Springfield, Missouri. And as always, we have Mr. Josh Thornhill with the Brookmead Church of Christ over in Johnson City, Tennessee. Josh, how you doing, brother?
I am good.
Glad to hear it. That's about it, though, right?
Maybe.
Okay. We got Richard Dodson with the Kearney Church of Christ up in Kearney, Missouri. Rich, you doing all right, man?
Getting settled in my new office.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. Trying to get everything situated.
Okay.
So you put your blankie down.
Yeah. I'm downstairs in the basement and I'm not used to, it's cold down here. So
Yeah.
I keep a blanket to keep me warm.
Right. That's where your wife sends you whenever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then we got Chris, whose image is froze up.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on with that. That's strange, but at least you can still hear me, right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. So that works. Oh man. Well, I guess we can just jump right into our study this morning because I think there's probably a lot we can say about this particular subject of cheating God. And this is something that I think is important for us to look at for a couple of reasons. One of which is the fact that there are so many different ways that sometimes we try to justify the things that we do. And in doing so, we may unknowingly be cheating or robbing God of what is due him, the honor that's due him, the glory that's due him, and the effort that we are supposed to be putting forth for him. And I think it manifests itself in many ways, especially for those who have, I shouldn't say especially, but certainly for those in secular work as well, in how it is we labor for for our employers and things of that nature. But it really goes back in part to Malachi chapter 1, when the children of Israel were offering up sacrifices, but the sacrifices they were offering, as is pointed out by the prophet Malachi, were the lame and the blind and everything that no one else wanted, right? That not the best of the flock, not something that God had required under the law in and of itself. And the prophet Malachi even points out that you're offering these as sacrifices to God, but yet you wouldn't even offer these animals to your governors, right? To those in leadership of the world. And yet here you are trying to offer them to God. They were cheating, robbing God of what he not only demanded, but what he deserved in their worship and in their sacrifices to him. And again, that's just a small part of what we can get into and talk about. But Romans chapter 12 tells us that we are to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice. So in Malachi, here they are offering up, dead sacrifice. They're killing these animals, offering them as sacrifices. They were supposed to be the unspotted, the unblemished, the very best and firstborn of the flocks. And in like manner, when it comes to our living sacrifice, we're supposed to be giving God our best. We're supposed to be doing our best for the Lord and glorifying him according to his will under the new covenant in Romans 12, verses 1 and 2, where we're not to be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our mind. Again, offering ourselves as a living sacrifice to him. And anything short of that, it could very much fall into this category of robbing or cheating God. So, Richard, I'm going to throw it to you at this time and just kind of, when it comes to this particular idea, what are some things that come to your mind?
Well, I think about how nobody likes to cheat. And, we talk about that all the time in the secular world. People get upset in politics, for instance. People have been yelling about, uh, various cheating taking place in elections.
Yeah.
And yes, there's different things that take place. Of course, if you watch the old Western, you can't help but think about the uh, card players and how somebody might have a card up their sleeve or something. And, of course, the gunfighter will get up and say, "You've been cheating." And of course, a gunfight takes place. Nobody likes to cheat. Nobody does. And that seems to be, everybody just feels like they're being slighted. And then of course we see cheating taking place all the time with people cheating on their taxes, people cheating on their mates, like you pointed out, cheating their employer. Cheating has gotten to be such a common thing. I even knew a Christian who changed his odometer on cars he was selling. Whenever he had a car to sell, he would roll back the miles on the odometer, which was cheating. And so, they didn't think anything of it. They were totally uh, obtuse, I guess you would say, to cheating other people. And the danger with that is sometimes, as you pointed out, we can cheat God. And sometimes, sometimes we do that even knowingly. Now that passage you quoted in Malachi, that's Malachi 1:14. These people even knew they were cheating because it says, "Cursed be the cheat who has a male in his flock and vows it, and yet sacrifices to the Lord what is blemished." So, I mean, they are promising something and not giving what the Lord, what was vowed to the Lord. And, there's plenty of passages, excuse me, there's plenty of passages that warn man that you better, when you make a vow to God, you better pay it. Ecclesiastes 5:4 and 5 talks about don't delay in paying a vow that you make to the Lord. You got to be really careful about making sure that you don't cheat God, because when you start cheating God, then you got to start thinking about how you feel when you get cheated. Well, how do you think God feels? Because nobody should ever cheat God. He's so full of grace and love and goodness that, why would we ever want to cheat him? But yet again, this idea of cheating gets so much ingrained in our practices that we don't even think about cheating God. And that's a really sad thing.
It's from what you said, Romans 6, there in verse 1, where Paul asked that rhetorical question, shall we sin that grace may abound? You could almost rephrase that to say, should we cheat God? And
Yeah.
really, that's what that boils down to, isn't it?
Yeah. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about not giving God what we promised to give. We're not dealing honestly with him. And all too often, I mean, some men act ignorantly. The apostles told those that gathered on Pentecost, that they'd acted ignorantly in killing Jesus. So, I mean, there are those who ignorantly slight God. And because of that, in that case, the Lord, did extend grace to allow them an opportunity to be able to hear the gospel and to repent. But yeah, some people know better. And, that's a scary thing. When you get into a position where you're going to cheat God, yeah, then you're facing his wrath. And that's not a good place. That puts you in danger of judgment.
And Josh, I mean, that's one of the biggest things about having a renewed mind, because isn't the whole, the pressure put on by the world is to get ahead almost by any means possible. I mean, to do what you can for number one, look out for number one, you just it's really becomes selfish, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Don't start that again.
Okay.
uh,
You're right, and I think partly it demonstrates how counterintuitive the gospel can be.
yeah.
Because that's what we think of as far as a man-made standpoint. But from the gospel standpoint, it's really just the opposite as far as getting ahead and being considered great within the kingdom. Um, I think going back to that verse in Malachi that you were speaking of, I think there's a lot of good thoughts there, especially as there's that kind of conversation going on where God's asking, "Where's my honor?" And Israel's like, "Well, how have we despised you?" And God says, "You're presenting defiled food on the altar." And they're like, "The table of the Lord is to be despised." And they present the blind for the sacrifice, and of course, as you mentioned there, they're offering the leftovers. They're offering God what's left over, and as Chris pointed out, they're offering to God what nobody else would want. Whereas what God wanted is He wanted the very first, the very best, to be given to Him because it was a sacrifice. And yet Israel had got to the point where they were just giving leftovers. And I think that the challenge, the danger for us is we can get to that very same point in our service to God as we present ourselves as the living sacrifice. We give God our leftovers, or we give God a portion of ourselves. I think it's 1 Corinthians 6 where Paul says, "You were bought at a price, therefore glorify God in your body, which belongs to God anyway."
Yeah.
Could you imagine going to the grocery store and you buying a pie and you take it home and you open up the package and you find that there's a chunk missing? You'd be rather upset, right? And rightfully so, because you paid for a whole pie and you kind of deserve to get a whole pie, right? You should get what you paid for. And if Jesus has purchased us with his own blood, and if we've been bought with a price, should we not give all of ourselves to the Lord? And I guess we could go into some of the ways in which we can give God our leftovers, but I think that's one of the ways that many people would cheat God is by not fully devoting themselves to Him, giving God a portion of their life. As I've kind of heard before, God wants full custody, not just weekend visits. And when we try and give Him just the weekend visits, we're cheating Him out of what He rightfully deserves. And I think Richard was right in that he was talking about you're not giving God what you promised, but you've also not given Him what He deserves.
Boy, that was
And
hard
that's
for
the
you to
way in which
say.
we can cheat Him. What's that?
That was hard for you to say right there.
I know it. I
Richard
know.
was right. you were. I could tell the hesitation.
I'm a little lightheaded from that, but
But yeah, I think yeah, absolutely. I think you're both right on that. And I think about David, and I can't remember. I'm struggling now. I'm a little lightheaded myself. Where it is where David went to offer a sacrifice, and when he gets to a certain man's house, the man's like he was going to give David everything that he needed. And David's like, no, 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 I can't do that. I can't offer that to God because it costs me nothing. Right. In other words, what David was saying is, I'm not going to cheat God by offering Him your stuff. Right. This needs to be my sacrifice that I'm going to offer. So it needs to be with my, something that I have that it belongs to me. And so he goes, I will pay for that. I will buy these things. I'm not just going to take from someone else and offer it. And when it comes to the weekend warrior, so to speak, that's part of that idea is trying to, when we try to add God to the rest of our lives rather than changing our lives to glorify Him, we are robbing Him, cheating Him out of the service and the glory that He deserves.
First Corinthians and First Corinthians chapter 11. Paul, I hope I'm not muted.
No, you're good.
Okay. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. I was going to say earlier, and I muted myself, but when you were talking about Josh admitting I was right, I said, Josh is getting older. He's becoming a little wiser in time.
in time.
But in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul says that we are to be imitators of him as he is of Christ.
Yeah.
Well, in 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 2, notice what he says to the Corinthians: make room in your hearts for us. We have wronged no one. We have corrupted no one, and we have taken advantage of no one. In other words, he didn't cheat anybody. And we're not just talking about cheating God. They didn't cheat anybody, but that would also include God. They didn't take advantage of anyone. And so that needs to be the Christian's mindset, first of all, is we're not going to cheat anybody. We're going to deal honestly with all men, because that's going to help us deal honestly with God. If we're cheating men, again, it can become a habit. And if it becomes a habit, you can find yourself becoming someone who cheats God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, you really need to be careful about. Look at Ananias and his wife.
Ananias, and Sapphira there in Acts chapter 5.
Yeah. Isn't that a good example?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly where I was thinking of going. Go ahead.
I'll let you go there. A passage I got in mind is Ezekiel 16 and verse 17, when the Lord said, you took your beautiful jewels of my gold and my silver, which I had given you, and made for yourselves images of men, and with them played the whore. So, I mean, all throughout we see in the Bible examples of those who cheated God. And so cheating is never good with other people or with the Lord. And so, and I'll let you go to Acts chapter 5, but yes, we need to be very careful about that.
Well, Acts chapter 5, I think, is a great example for several reasons, but here's a couple of the main ones. First of all, their cheating God had nothing to do with the money they withheld, right, in and of itself.
No, it was their own.
That's right. It was theirs, right? They could do with it as they wanted. But when you look at what was taking place, and in the context, we have Barnabas, for example, who had sold a lot of land and gave all those proceeds to the church in Jerusalem, and was recognized and praised for it. And then here comes Ananias and Sapphira, and that's, they claim to do the same thing. Now, why did they do that?
It was a vow. They were making that vow, even though they were doing it for man's glory. They were still putting it out there that, hey, we're giving this to God. We're giving it all to him.
And they're giving it all, right?
Yeah.
That's the claim they made. And so not only were they robbing or cheating God in that aspect, because they were lying about it, which Peter confronts them on, but then they're also, trying to take glory, right? They wanted the glory. Yeah. They wanted the praise, the pat on the back, the recognition for what was being accomplished through what they were giving, rather than God. All right. And so it's not always about monetary things as much as it can be just about recognition and doing things our way rather than God's way. Josh, jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
distracted
by Richard's phone there.
I try to keep the colors down, not to distract Josh. Movements. That's why we got Chris locked up.
Yeah.
So Josh won't get distracted.
Yeah, the phone doesn't help though. But
I'm turning it down now.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Where were we?
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, let's make some other practical application. We talked about Ananias and Sapphira, and I'm going to throw musical instruments out there as an example. Why do most people you claim that we can use instruments in worship for music?
Because a
lot of it boils down to the fact that that's their preference.
That's right. And so what have they made worship about? right?
pleasing myself,
About
us,
that's
what
right,
we want, what we
themselves, right?
desire, rather than what God wants.
Exactly. And so there's a way that we cheat God, right? Because we're making what is supposed to be a worship towards him his way about us and our wants, our desires, our likes. And so we're taking that away from God. And
Oh, but no, Chris. As long as you're offering it to God, he's happy. It's what's in your heart that matters.
Ask Cain.
How about Nadab and Abihu?
yeah,
Yeah, ask them too.
Yeah, there's a lot of people we could put in there.
absolutely. Yeah. But oh yeah, you can say it all you want, right?
Well, that's what they say. It's what's in your heart that matters. And this instruments and music, it fills my heart with joy, and then I praise God, and that's what he's looking for. He's looking for it's what's in your heart and how you proclaim that heart to the Lord. That's what he's looking for. Not for issues, not for standards, not for commandments about what's right from wrong. He wants the heart. That's what he's looking for.
Yeah. And
I'm being the devil's advocate here.
I know it. And that's the thing though. You basically threw out in your thing, not this, not that. You said standards, right?
Right.
He doesn't want standards. Well, once those standards are thrown out, you guys talked about this last week when you talked about humanism. Where's the standard? What standard are we going to use to determine morality, to determine right and wrong, and to determine what is pleasing to God? Because what I may want is going to be different than what you may want.
Well, that's just it. Who's God and who isn't?
That's right.
I mean, I say this all the time when we're talking about instrumental music. I'll ask somebody, what's my favorite music? And if I don't tell you, you don't know. So, I mean, if you want to play music for me, I may not like it. And why is that? Because I may not.
You don't have good taste.
Yeah.
Mr. Smooth Jazz. But anyway.
But the thing is, God is he's his own individual with his own likes and dislikes. I mean, he made that very clear to the Israelites. I am not like you. Isn't that in Isaiah? We looked at that a few weeks ago. I think that's in Isaiah. I am not like you. He has his own likes and his own dislikes. And so we have to listen to what he likes, and he's told us what he likes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's gets back to you're cheating God out of what he wants. And again, he's God, we're not. And since he's God, automatically our knee should bow to his will.
Yeah. But at the same time, we need to be careful not to be pharisaical and bind things that are not bound, right? That God does not determine. Such as the Pharisee in Luke chapter 18, who went to said, I'm glad I'm not like all these other people. Look at the things that I'm doing. I'm fasting and so many times a week. I'm doing all these things. And that wasn't a command of God, right? Again, he was doing it for his own glory because he became his own standard, which is again a way of robbing or cheating God. And even in the workplace, when it comes to Colossians chapter 3, 1 Peter chapter 2, and other places, when you labor, he says, labor as unto the Lord, remembering while you may work for someone here and now, God is the one who's blessing you. God is the one from whom all those blessings come. And when you work and you labor and you have an attitude, that's not in my job description. That's not what I'm getting paid for. And you start becoming rather stiff-necked in your attitude, and really forgetting from whom these blessings come. Rather than laboring for the Lord, your focus is merely upon the things of this world. And again, you're robbing God of the glory that he could be receiving when you go that extra mile that Jesus talked about. Well, I know there's a certain context with Roman soldiers there. Still, the point is true for us even today, to be willing to go beyond, not for our own benefit, but for the glorifying of God. You guys are awful quiet.
I thought Josh was ready to say something.
Yeah, but it takes him 15 minutes to get going.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I was looking for that passage that I brought up about God being like
Isaiah
us.
5 or Isaiah 55?
Yeah, I'll look it up in a minute after Josh gets something to say. But the one about God, he's not like us.
My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts.
There you go. There you go. There's there's another one as well. But
I think it's chapter 30. Behold, you thought I was just like you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them, right? I mean, listen, this is not a new problem, right? I think that illustrates that point very well, because going all the way back to, the divided kingdom, and we could go back even further to David and others, that this is what they were going through. This is what people were dealing with, struggling with, and trying to get trying to do things their own way. And God has been dealing with this with mankind from the beginning.
Yeah. Now, if you think about our show, for instance, the Berean spirits, it's titled because of that, what we read about the Bereans in Acts 17. And an apostle came to them, Apostle Paul came to them preaching the gospel. And they were eager, in verse 11, they were eager to hear the message, but they still examined what was said with the scriptures to see if those things were so. In other words, they were checking him out, and they were checking out an apostle, the Apostle Paul, an inspired man, right? I mean, that's how important it was for them to make sure that what they were doing was in accordance with the will of God. Now, contrast that to what Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy 4:3-4. The time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears. So there's your motive. They want something else. They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and they will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. And so, going right back to what you said, Chris, that is cheating God, is when suddenly you don't like his terms. You don't like what he's setting forth. And so now you're going to look for your own set of teachers so that you can justify what you want to do. And so what you're actually saying, when that takes place in your life, you're saying, I don't like how God's doing things. God, I want you to scoot over on your throne there. I'm going to take a seat, and I'm going to start doing it the way I want to do it. Now, again, who's God and who isn't? And God's not going to move. I got news for you. He's not coming off that throne. He is God. You're not. But yet what you're trying to do is usurp his authority. And when you do that, you are taking something that belongs to him. You are cheating God.
Josh, go ahead.
I think that's true as far as what Richard is talking about. Yeah, that.
Thanks for the validation, Josh. Appreciate that.
What's that?
Another agreement.
And yeah.
He's getting older.
This is Richard's day, isn't it?
It is.
There some of the things that we've been talking about, as far as the instrumental music and stuff, it's true and it's important. But I think that, and it's important to make those kinds of applications, but I also think it's just as important to make applications to ourselves as well. Because we can be just as guilty of giving God the leftovers. And I think that's kind of what Richard was touching on in his point that he was just making there. I think one of the ways that we can give God leftovers is in worship ourselves. Maybe when we go to worship only when it's convenient for us, we're cheating God.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we have the appearance that, we're being righteous, but if the only time we go is when we don't have something else to do, we're not honoring God. It's just because we don't have anything better to do. And the minute we have something better to do, which is not really better, then God gets left out. And we're cheating God. And I heard a conversation just on Sunday afternoon. We had a couple whose family was going to have them over for dinner and celebrate Mother's Day. And somebody had asked them, like, "Oh, are you going to be there at worship on Sunday or church tonight?" And it's like it's indicative of this attitude of, well, as long as you have something, if you have something better to do, then worship is okay. You don't have to go worship. You can go do something else. We're giving God the leftovers, and we're cheating God because He deserves the preeminence in our life. And when we put everything else in front of Him, we're not giving Him the preeminence that He deserves. And so, in that sense, we're cheating God by giving Him what's left. We're giving Him the lame, the sick, the blind. No offense, Chris. We're giving Him all of that because we want our time to be devoted to what we want. And if I have something more fun to do, or if I have somewhere else to go, I'm going to go do that rather than go worship God. And I think that's a serious problem. Sports takes precedence. Our times with friends takes precedence. Our vacations take precedence. And God gets left on the back burner because we found all this other stuff that we'd rather do. And God's not just sitting up in heaven just thrilled that you're having a great time on vacation or that you're enjoying your barbecue with your friends. He's wondering why He's not taking the first place in your heart and why everything else is.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another way in which so many have cheated God, and they think that, there's nothing wrong with what it is that they're doing.
So there's that aspect of collective worship, right? And what we do as a congregation, men perhaps who would neglect, trying to help out in certain leadership roles that they might be able to accomplish, but yet, they just, they don't, not participating in worship, let alone not attending. But then there's private aspects of worship as well, where we neglect prayer, or we neglect Bible study, we neglect Bible reading. We make time for so many other things in our lives, and yet, if we were to take a person, for example, who is working 60 to 80 hours or more every week, and they say, "I'm doing it for my family, I'm doing it to make a better life for my wife and for my kids," and you go and you talk to those kids, and even the spouse, like, well, it would be a better life if they were here more, right, than away from us. I mean, the money, okay, there's lots of things we can do with the money, but what good is that if we can't have that relationship? And it boils down to them feeling as though they're being cheated out of a relationship with that person. And while they may have all the material things of the world, that they still are lacking because that relationship isn't there. And when we neglect prayer, we neglect getting into the Word of God, we're neglecting our relationship with God. And in that sense, we are cheating Him out of our relationship, cheating ourselves, let alone cheating God. And so I think that's something also that needs to be considered.
That's like
And I think,
Solomon. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
Go ahead, Josh. Yeah.
I think along those lines, the people who work and work and work to try and have a quote unquote better life. A better life is a spiritual life.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And I think what we do when we try and focus on those things is we get the cart before the horse. It's okay to not have the latest and greatest cars. It's okay to not have, the latest and greatest electronics. It's okay to not have, all of these material possessions. It's okay to not to have TV service and all that other stuff. if it means that you have more time to spend devoting to the Lord. And uh, I think, again, we get things backwards when we think that the good life is the material life. The good life's the spiritual life. Even if we are lacking a lot of material things, and I'll say material wants, not needs, even if we're lacking a lot of the material wants, we can still have a good life if we are focused on honoring the Lord and serving Him faithfully.
Well, it depends on what somebody calls good, but if you're calling good happy, and you're right. Um, the deepest and happiest life is always in service to God, and so but that's just again that shows up in people's motives. We got a comment from Chris Kramer. He always tunes in. He says it amazes me how many times people blame God and rob Him of worship and faithfulness because they are mad at someone at church.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. You're right. The things that we allow to cause us to rob God, right? To cheat God. Um, yeah.
Can I give a personal story that kind of goes with that? And there was a member who kind of set me straight. This happened years ago, but we had a class teacher who was extremely offensive. And I just had enough of him. One day he got very offensive, and I thought, I'm not coming to his class anymore. I'm just not coming. And so I didn't go to Bible class. I'd come to worship, but I wasn't going to go listen to that man insult me or insult other people. I mean, he was just very offensive. And an older Christian grabbed me, and he basically made that same point that Chris just made. And he's like, you can't let somebody else influence you from offering God service. And he's right. I mean, sometimes we can get offended by someone at church, and we're thinking, oh, I'm not going to even I'm going to not even support them in this endeavor because they're so offensive. But yet, what are you doing? You're not there to defend the gospel. You're not there to do service for the Lord, and it's just the wrong way to handle it. And so, Chris is right. I mean, that's a really good point. It happened to me, and I thought I thought my motives were being right, but he's exactly right. We can't rob God of our service just because we're mad at somebody at church. That's a good point.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, and we see that happening all the time, right? I mean, you've got people that church hop, because they may live in an area with an abundance of congregations, and they get their feelings hurt. This thing happens, that thing happens, and pretty soon they've been members of every congregation in a city. I saw that happen in Louisville over and over again. And people just kept running away, and it really, the idea seems to be they're trying to find out, or they're in it for themselves rather than for God. And again, I think all this comes down to selfishness, right? I mean, why does anyone cheat in the world, right? Just worldliness, and at poker, in card games, as Richard had brought up earlier. We're always trying to look for that angle or that way to benefit ourselves, right? That's what it comes down to. It comes down to selfishness. It comes down to a lack of faith. It comes down to just God not being in the picture. And even sometimes we think we're doing it for God, but ultimately it's to serve ourselves.
Yeah, I can't help but think of Solomon. When he was when they put the ark in the temple, I guess they were dedicating it. But remember, he said that part of his speech was that they need to be wholly true to the Lord and walking in His laws. And but even with Solomon, after he said that to the Israelites, I mean, what happened? later on, he got careless
Yeah.
and he was not wholly devoted to the Lord. He had those wives that turned his heart. And so, we got to be really careful if we're going to be devoted as Josh was saying, then we need to make sure that we are protecting that which we treasure.
Mhm.
And that which we treasure should be our relationship with God.
Yeah. Yeah. Setting our affections on things above and not on things of this world. I is where is a great place to start, no doubt about it. So, um, Josh, any last thoughts on today's topic?
I think the point that Richard had made about um, removing God off of the throne, God reigns. I think it's Isaiah 52 and verse 7 where it says that God, your God, reigns. Now, by the way, Psalm 50 is where, and verse 21 is the one, behold, you thought I was just like you.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking for right there.
Anyway, at the end of the day, God is reigning. And obviously, the kingdom's not of this world. God's not sitting on a throne somewhere in this earth reigning. He's reigning in the hearts and lives of his people. And we can surrender ourselves to him and give him our complete and total devotion and allegiance, or we could serve ourselves, and of course we'll suffer the consequences when we do.
Yeah.
God deserves the very best that we have to offer. God deserves our complete and total love and devotion, and it's up to us to give it to him, lest we cheat him.
Yeah. Richard, last thoughts?
I just amen what Josh said.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little lightheaded there, Richard.
Oh man.
No,
Folks, yeah.
I'm good. I'm good, Josh.
Yeah.
I know the truth when I hear it.
There you go. There you go. Man, folks, we appreciate everybody who listens to Berean Spirits for sure. Those who share it out to all your friends and family and gives us a thumbs up, a like, and those who comment, thanks so much for all of that. And remember not only to subscribe to the YouTube and Facebook channels, but also if you want to catch episodes after the fact as well, or listen again, you can do so on Spotify and through podcast. So that's an option as well. But once again, thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. And until next time, remember to search the scriptures with Berean Spirits.
Well, folks, that's all for today. Don't worry. Lord willing, the guys will be back next week for another Bible study on Berean Spirits. Until then, let the guys hear from you. Drop them some email at bereanspirits@gmail.com. They'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep studying that Bible.